Hey, Matt Sitter here, CEO of AFN. At AFN, we believe that change is where opportunity happens, and the best way to find opportunity in change is a network that's diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. When we have our fireside chats, we're trying to bring in great expertise of industry mavens that are out there that have done a lot, learned a lot along the way, so that we can expand our networks and make use of their knowledge. So today we've got Brian Lillie with us. Brian understands exceptionally well technology and specifically AI's impact and requirements in the physical world. We'll get into a little bit more around what that means in a sec. He was president at Rackspace Technology, board member at a number of tech companies, Air Force veteran, and a student of leadership who was forced to take a break from getting his PhD in leadership to lead at Rackspace. And most importantly, a lot of people know him as Coach Lillie. Brian, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Matt, for the kind words, and good morning, and happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, the main crux of our topic that we're going to be looking at today is uncertainty. Uncertainty is really high right now. I think that people feel that. We see that a lot in the media. And it seems like urgency is pretty high right now, too, which seems like a bad combination. Opportunity for a lot of mistakes that are out there. So we'll be working through that. First, I want to talk a little bit about how you've thought about artificial intelligence and your place in it. So when we're thinking about how the physical world is keeping up with AI's demands, when we're thinking about the data centers that are out there, how well do you think we're doing on that? And what do you see happening next there?
Well, it's tremendous. It's kind of a land grab, tremendous growth right now. They said, at least the report I read just yesterday said, 30 gigawatts of power by 2030, bringing online. And, when you think about all of that capacity that needs to be brought online, and training is different than inference, but, that's a combination of, natural resources that are limited, power consumption that is now competing with cities. Part of the good news is that in training models, you don't have to do like what we did at Equinix. We built network rich hubs right in the center of the action because we wanted eyeballs and traffic and all that. But with AI training, you can actually do that more remotely.
Okay.
And you can do that near power supplies, power sources. There's new storage technology for storing that power, and so that's one of the benefits. But the capacity needed is going to drive not only data center, it's going to drive land baking, it's going to drive fiber extending to these sites, and it's going to require, I think, regulation. So it's the physical world is scrambling, and I look at technology that's happening to both take advantage and enable this, and it's a great time to be in tech, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
But it is a little crazy, a little frothy out there.
Well, and I think, one of the things that I found so interesting about Equinix, not knowing anything going in when I talked to you when you were there, was it's a REIT, right? So when we're thinking about it, it's a real estate company, but that's the thing that has to power all the stuff that we're working on our screens wherever we are in the world all day. And you're saying like, hey, the energy needs are really important and where you're sitting. And so I think we can easily forget how important the physical world is around us.
Oh yeah. Well, it's so funny. I remember giving talks and tours of the data centers, and we bring in these college students, and they were asking questions, and they were almost naive. They said, well, where is the cloud? Well, where is my application? Like they just thought differently. And I said, the cloud is data centers and compute and network and storage, and I mean, cooling. It's all these physical things. And it's that on steroids with AI. And I think that the challenge is, how do you retrofit? I mean, when I was at Rackspace and I was looking at these requirements that were coming in, they didn't want to talk to you unless it was 100 kilowatt per rack. Well, the average of in a co-location provider, at least when I was there, was 4 to 6 kVA per rack. So you're talking 25x before
Yeah.
they'll talk to you. And now I've even read there's companies out there that are building to a megawatt rack, a megawatt. So it's the extension of what we built, and then how do you retrofit
Yeah.
previous data centers versus building greenfield. There's a lot of work to be done, and we really can't ignore the network effect. Like this, when you look at the NVIDIA platform and the requirements that they have around not only compute, which they're building, the GPUs, but also network.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a great time to be in tech. It's frothy, it's exciting, but it's also fraught with some real challenges.
Yeah. Lots of problems that can be solved. And you don't get paid for the easy stuff, I don't think.
No, no.
When what do you think's got to happen for us to keep up with AI's demands? I mean, you mentioned regulation that's got to change. I think energy is there, but what do you think that we should be doing differently right now as a society to be able to keep up with AI's demands?
You know, my answer may surprise you because I very much believe that the physical will keep up. I think power and cooling are the largest concerns. People know how to build data centers. They know they're very, very smart people. There's a lot of smart money going after data centers, both private equity, even venture capital. But if you look at Digital Realty or Digital Bridge, the private
Yeah.
equity firm out of Colorado here, the investments that they're making, and then I've been traveling quite a bit overseas, and what you see is happening in the Middle East in terms of the investment in data centers
Yeah.
there. I got the opportunity to work with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and what they're building, the massive infrastructure that's being built. So I think I think network will keep up. I think we'll move much, much more from electro-optical to more pure optical. I think that's coming. And I think cooling, I've been following this company ZutaCore for a while now, which does a dielectric cooling direct to the chip, so you can avoid
Wow.
water. And it's a significant, talking about PUEs, the efficiency measurement of data centers. One is perfect, and they're getting down to 1.05, 1.03. So
Wow.
so I think the physical and the tech is coming. The piece that I'm worried about is a conversation with my son. My son's a teacher up in the state of Washington, and his wife is a school psychologist. And they said what they have seen in the children, and these are middle school to high school,
Okay.
that they're just dumping the question in chat gpt, getting the answer, pasting it in, and they're done. And so
Okay.
it's more the societal, how do we ensure that AI is more of a thought partner than
Hmm.
a do my job, do my thinking for me. And there is extreme worry, at least in the educator's mind, about how to leverage, but also manage and control and AI in the classroom, and AI and in
Yeah.
fact, I just reposted something I saw on LinkedIn where Sabina, I forget her last name, she posted about how she tried a 3-month experiment and she came up with rules for how she was going to use it because she felt she was getting dumber. It was a very
Hmm.
interesting
Hmm.
post. So I think I'm more worried about that, and I don't want overregulation, but I think there's got to be some thought put into this from the government, from industry leaders, from education, from parents. That's what I'm more concerned about
Sure.
keeping up
Sure.
on.
All right. So I agree with you 100%. We still got to know what questions to ask, even if we can get answers out there. I think that innovation comes from scarcity in some way. Now we have too much information flowing at us. So we still have to figure out how to ask those questions.
That's right.
Um,
And
and so,
By the way, Matt, it translates to the workforce. I mean, one of the things that was really important at Rackspace, and our CHRO, she's phenomenal, Kelly Teal Guest, she spearheaded we are going to train and educate 100% of our workforce and built a program around educating the workforce. And we have to think about how do we get workers to leverage it without it replacing? How do we teach managers how to manage in
yep,
an AI world? And then really at the top, how do we lead in an AI world? Because I'll tell you the efficiency gains are immense, immense.
right,
But how do we keep human in the loop?
yeah. Well, when you think about software developers, so software developers can get 10x more um, volume out of it, but a great coder will get 10x more great code. A
Yeah,
mediocre coder will get 10x more mediocre code. And so it's still like we've got to be up leveling to make sure that we're using it the best way possible.
that's right. That's right.
As we're thinking about, so I think we're talking about there's some uncertainty on how we're going to actually drive forward on making sure that people can use AI well. Just thinking about uncertainty generally, what was some of the uncertainty that you were seeing out there at Rackspace that felt unusual to you?
Yeah, and I think I'll share a little bit of Rackspace and then also a little bit of working on the Lumentum board because right in the middle of the of AI. So at Rackspace, the I was the president of private cloud. So it was about $1 billion, $1.2 billion business that was declining because of the growth in public cloud. And we would talk to customers and what they were facing uncertainty about is number one, do I have the staff to make the pivot to public cloud?
Okay.
Do I know how to do that? How do I do that? And which is why a service business was built around public cloud at Rackspace. So that pivot, the other uncertainty that I saw over and over again was a cost uncertainty and
Okay.
in essence, outsourcing. And the cost was twofold. It was financial. I was moving from a CapEx kind of model to an OpEx model. But the other cost was this brain drain of capability that that was now being outsourced to the
Yeah.
hyperscalers as opposed to being able to sort of manage that and have hands-on. Now, some companies would say, I don't want to be in that because I'm making soap or whatever.
Right.
They didn't care. But there were others that were, they're like, we are a tech company and it feels like we're outsourcing our capability to an unknown and a very costly unknown. So I saw that pivot a lot. The biggest uncertainty I saw was, and it was back to, it's funny, Matt, it was back to, there was an article that said every CIO was getting the question from their CFO and CEO, why aren't we moving to the cloud? Move to the cloud. There
Okay.
was a
Yeah.
lot of people that just ran to it and then was like,
Yeah.
um, now what I'm hearing is, why aren't we embracing AI? What are we doing in AI?
Yeah.
How is it
Okay.
affecting us today? Is our workforce ready? Why aren't we more efficient? Do we really need to hire that person? I saw this every day. And so, the uncertainty was around, this pivot to cloud that's been there for a while.
Yeah.
AI was the new sort of 800-pound gorilla in the worry farm. And then the last one is this, and it's really been in 2025, this uncertainty around the economy, tariffs,
Yeah.
our role in the world. And so I would have I would have heart to heart with CIOs about all three of these. And there was some fear, I would even say, not even just
Sure.
uncertainty, but
Yeah.
fear. Yeah.
Well, I love the question that you brought up coming from to the CIOs from the CFO and CEOs, like, what are we doing about X? Why aren't we doing X? And implied in that when you're getting those questions, and there's a lot of ambiguity around what they mean, is like, hey, why aren't we doing this right now?
Faster. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're saying I don't know exactly what we're wanting to be doing here, but I want you to do it a lot faster. And I even think when you were talking about CIOs switching to public cloud, you know, in one case they said, all right, I have a task. I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that. But in the other case, thinking about the cost is like, hey, we understand the method, but we don't understand how much that's going to be. So you had uncertainty in a few different areas. And I imagine so you had to be coaching your team on uncertainty, but also your clients, a lot of times you were trying
A
to coach
lot.
them through uncertainty. And so when you thought about their responsibility in this uncertainty and the tendency that we know that people are going to have to move towards urgency, what do you think the leader's responsibility is in dealing with that uncertainty?
Uh, there's a huge responsibility, and this is where I I sort of understand why the CEO, CFO put pressure on the CIO, but I also would counsel to not do that because it creates, there's the four quadrants where it's urgency and importance, right? And there, the tyranny of the now is when it's not important and it's urgent,
Right.
right? And you gotta and it's just this frazzled sort of environment. It's the worst environment for any sort of strategic value creation thinking and doing because you're just acting at the tyranny of the urgent
Right.
versus it's important but it's not urgent, and that's where you do your best thinking. It's where you really focus on the strategy and on what you need to do to create value. And so to me, the role of the leader is always first and foremost to self-regulate, right?
Okay.
It's to self-regulate. Because the people in the organization are really looking to you for clarity of purpose and connecting the dots for them with them about how we're trying to achieve this. And I always use the term guide using a North Star of
Hmm.
what is it that we're trying to accomplish as a firm and make that abundantly clear. And
Yep.
it was, what is it, Mark Twain that said, I would have written you a letter or a short note, but I didn't have the time. Um, uh, make it crisp and concise and
Right.
clear and understandable, and now connect the dots to that. So, for example, if one of the missions is, as you and I were talking earlier, I need to connect, 1,000 stores, and I need and the tools that they're going to be using are mostly cloud based. What am I trying
Right.
to do? I'm trying to do a digital transformation for my customers. So that's the mission. That's what I'm trying to achieve. Well, then
Yep.
maybe a pivot to the public cloud with multiple zones makes sense. And so that's the reason that you do it, not just because you read something in the CEO magazine that said
Right.
you should be in the cloud or you should be doing AI.
Yeah.
And I think that setting that North Star and being this bastion of calm, it's like the captain of the ship. They're in this hell of a storm, and there they are, just holding the rudder, just
Yeah.
steady and calm. And then when they look at that, that's how they're going to act. And you can still be urgent, but still be calm. And it's to me that is incumbent upon the leader, and it starts with really with self-regulation.
Um, well, and I think, as we're talking about the trends that are here, a lot of the questions are coming up around AI, but, this has happened before where people ask questions about internet, they ask questions about blockchain and things like that. And you're saying like, hey, how do we, I love that you referenced the Eisenhower matrix, it's just like, hey, how do we actually put ourselves on the track where we're thinking about importance versus urgency here? Sometimes you got to keep the lights on, and that's really urgent. And if you don't have money coming in, you
Right,
can't deal with
right.
that. But being able to pivot towards that importance is useful. When we think about urgency, right? You're saying like, hey, urgent but calm. When we see false urgency out there in organizations, and this a lot of times, as a leader of leaders, you've got to be managing this as like, hey, let's make sure that we're getting in the right quadrant there. How do you help reshape folks towards getting away from that false urgency?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I've seen that a lot. Um, how I've done it in the past, and how I would suggest is that first of all, you have to have a psychologically safe organization. I think that's really incumbent upon the leader, the CEO in particular, but really every leader of every org needs to create this ability to speak up. We had an offsite and I brought in Mike Mullane, the former astronaut, and he does a phenomenal job of talking through the shuttle disaster and how it was the opposite of psychological safety that created that environment where they wouldn't speak up. And so if people feel that they can speak up, then what can happen is you can call that out much easier. So to me as a leader, it is incumbent upon you to build that environment, to make
Hmm.
sure that environment exists. And then when this false urgency comes in, or anything else that is potentially causing harm, or causing, frankly, you to go down the wrong path, shift off what's important,
Right.
you can call it out because you're safe to call it out. And when I've had individual contributors say, wait a minute, why are we doing this? And we're busting our ass to do this by Monday. And they're challenging it. First of all, do we need to do it? Second off, is that deadline real? And
Yeah.
and I always ask my leaders, I say, you should answer that question because I didn't ask for it by Monday. And there's
Yeah.
many times where you've sort of described this as um, uh, where you explain the why. There's typically a strong willingness to follow, especially like you said,
Yeah.
a really good example in a startup is we're running out of money. So like we have got to go into, tightened belts, no spend. I mean, I've seen people take pay cuts. I've seen people go to part-time. I've seen people give their job to another. Like they just said, look, you don't need
Right.
two of us. Jill is better. I'll self-select out. Just treat me nice on the way out. Like I've seen some heroic acts because they care about the company, they care about their teammates.
Right.
If you've built that environment, um, uh, that urgency can be followed. I think it's got to tie back to the mission, and it's got to be done in a sense of calmness and clarity.
Um, there's a ton of different questions that I come up in my mind around this, but when we think about being able to actually uh, guide people in the right direction, we're dealing with organizations where networked intelligence is much more important. You've got a ton of different people out there. You said, hey, all right, I got to be able to tell you what we're doing and why we're doing it. But you've got all these different nodes that are supplying information back to the center, which should be helping to reinforce or at least help guide the story that's being told. When we're thinking about information coming from all these different folks, people who are dealing with suppliers, they're dealing with customers, they're dealing with other third parties, how do you help create that cohesive story for everyone, given the fact that information is moving so fast and the sources are so distributed?
It is to me, whether you're a commander, imagine if you're a CENTCOM and you have to communicate out to all those bases after we attacked Iran. Imagine the communication and the listening to the front, listening to the field. I think it starts with shared values. I really do. I think it starts with um, sort of an empowerment of that. Again, this goes back to psychological safety and empowerment of people to speak up willingly. You and I are fans of. I mean, you worked with them of General McChrystal and Team of Teams, and this notion of creating nodes, and these nodes can communicate. It's almost like a shared consciousness.
Yeah.
That they have. How do you build that? And in the military, you could build that esprit de corps. The mission was very clear. most of the time. Um, and I think people were expected to not just, at least my experience in the Air Force was expected. I was a commander of a communication squadron. I had about 130 people, Air Force, a couple of Navy, and some other organizations.
Yeah.
And we created this environment, and it was hard because we had to break down stovepipes
Yeah.
between groups. You know what I'm talking about. And but people knew. I said, listen, you know, call bullshit on me. Make it clear to
Yeah.
you and your leaders when we're going down the wrong path, we're not doing the right thing, or that communication isn't getting there. So to me, it's making sure you have these nodes and you don't, I know this is a little bit of an antithesis to military, but a one striper could have just as much influence as the captain. If you
Hmm.
listened, and if that one was an expert, they were closest to the action.
Right.
So
Right.
I think creating this shared consciousness around shared values in a psychologically safe environment, you're going to get information dissemination consistently and fearlessly than if you build this sort of closed mindset,
Yeah.
hierarchical command and control. We've seen that frankly between the two armies in Ukraine. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
I mean, I think the requirement around this being an open environment and then the psychological safety piece is you don't, if someone's got something relevant to be able to add and they don't feel comfortable being able to add it, things are happening so fast that you're causing yourself greater challenge.
you've cut, you know, it's a really interesting, we were doing this activity in change management at Rackspace, and there was this notion of a leadership spine. And it's not just that leadership has to have a spine, but the spine that goes from the CEO to the COO to all the way down to the frontline manager. And and that if any one of those are out of alignment, it's like your back,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? You
Sure.
feel it.
Sure.
And it
Right.
literally can cut the communication, which is why this shared consciousness, this connectedness based on shared values, based on the core purpose or the mission, is so crucial and is almost to the point of monotonous in terms of communicating this. It has to be inculcated in the organization, not only from the top,
Right. Right.
right? Mid-level has to be talking about it. Frontline managers have to be talking about it. And it's hard to do, but that's to me the best way in a world that we live in where information communication is second to none, and we have more ways to do it than we've ever had before.
Right.
To me, there's no excuse for not doing it.
Um, the psychological safety is definitely a consistent factor that we've talked about around this. Shared values, you said, that's really important for us to be able to get there, as well as being able to call bullshit on
That's
me,
right.
right? You
That's
said,
right.
hey, be able to call. What other ways do you think that organizations miss the boat on being able to create that psychologically safe environment?
Well, I think sometimes there's a belief that um, that adaptability in the moment, that this empowered execution in the moment isn't supported. And so it's
Okay.
it's it's a little bit separate from psychologically safe but it's connected to it. But where you think all the answers, and I've seen this, you look to the top for the answers. Oh, well, all the answers have to come from Sally.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
she's the one. And so what it does is it grinds the organization to a halt. And so
Right.
somehow when you're building this culture, this empowered execution where and it's the ability, and you've heard this in innovation terms, fail fast. People are going to make mistakes. I guarantee you that the person at the top's making mistakes. So why do you hammer this, frontline manager if they make a mistake
Yeah.
when, you make them every day? So to me, it's empowering the execution, which is and allowing them to be adaptable, allowing them to find more efficient ways. We had a core value at
Yeah.
Equinix that I think was one of my favorite when we built the magic of Equinix. I was a part of that team. It was called Find a Better Way. That was the
Okay.
core
Yeah.
value. And it wasn't just around, like, the tech people jumped on that. Oh, they're talking about innovation. We're going to fund this, blah, blah, blah. But no, it could be find a better way in accounts receivable, find a better way in purchasing, find a better way in the cafeteria. There's every single team responsible for their area, their functional area, can improve their lot. How do we empower them, enable them, encourage them to do that?
Right. Well, and I think the language here I think is pretty important because there is obsession around there around the term best practices, but that implies that, hey, we figured it out. And
That's
one of
right.
our chiefs actually uses the idea, her company, they talk about next practices, which I thought was great. But I
That's
think find a
great.
better way is very much aligned with how you talk about that. I do think that, as we're talking about, you said, hey, we want to enable adaptability out there. Infinite adaptation doesn't scale. And so being able to get that feedback loop, so it's just like, hey, we did this differently, and being able to have the organization ingest that. How do you react to that thought line?
Oh, I, I think that's extremely well said because of, I don't know if you had this in the military, but the OODA loop, right?
Hmm.
Observe, orient, decide, act. And it's a loop. And it's a loop. And if
Yeah.
you can tighten your OODA loop
Yep.
more than your opponent or more than your competition, you'll win. And and it could be your adversary. In
Yeah.
my opinion, again, my opinion, Ukraine has a tighter OODA loop than Russia does. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no way they should be as far along as they are. And it's because of this flow. To me, you could apply the OODA loop to process improvement. So like you said, I love the next practice versus, I never liked best practice because that implies that there's a cookbook. That's like Nicholas
Yeah.
Sparks, how IT is irrelevant kind of a thing. There's always a better way,
Right.
always a better way. You just got to find it. And the OODA
Yeah.
loop, this closed loop that you're talking about, to me is exactly what it is. It's, wow, we just chopped 5 days off the financial close. Are we
Yeah.
done? No, because maybe there's more time to find, or maybe there's higher quality, or maybe there's a sub process to that could be improved. There's always a better way.
And
Always.
your circumstances are certain to change as well. So you might have found the best way right now,
That's
and it's
right.
almost immediately out of date.
Well,
Um,
or you might have found a way that you have optimized it to the point that it's diminishing returns. Let's move on to the next one.
yeah.
But we don't say, oh, that's locked and loaded, done forever.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's it's never done.
You changed where the critical path was.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so John Boyd is the guy who came up with the OODA loop, and I've done a lot of work actually with one of the companies I work with and looking at the F-16 around that. So got a lot of respect around his whole thought
Thank
process
you,
on
thank you
things.
for catching my. I could not remember that he was a colonel, right? He was a colonel, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Really interesting career. Um, all right, so I want to ask you one more question, then we'll open it up for other folks that are out there. But what are you looking forward to in the rest of 2025?
Well, 2025. The first 6 months have been. What is it? May we live in interesting times, I think is a
Yeah,
Chinese
right.
proverb.
Okay.
Uh, it's been a whirlwind. And I think there's been, frankly, histrionics on both sides. I think we all just need to calm down and 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 realize that, there is change. It is a VUCA world, which I
Mhm.
love that model, by the way.
Can you just say what VUCA stands for really quick? Because not everyone
Oh,
has
it's
a background.
volatile, uncertain, uh, uh, changing and adaptable. I always forget the acronyms, but the intention is that with the speed at which things are changing, with the volatility of it, with the fact that it's uncertain, that you can't, people want perfect information to make perfect decisions, and this goes back to wanting to control their environment. This is to me the foundation of stoicism. You can't control your environment. control what you can control what you can control,
Right.
and let the rest go. And I mean, if you read one book I would absolutely read is the Enchiridion. This is by
Okay.
Epictetus. I would read Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. These books, their environment. I mean, if you want to look at a crazy environment, look at what Marcus Aurelius had to lead through: the wars, the famines, the loss of multiple children, etc. So what I'm looking forward to in the second half of the year is I would hope that people could embrace some of the Stoic philosophy um, that says, okay, I'm going to control what I control, and I want the grace to let go the rest. Um, I personally am going to do and am doing and have done for a while daily intentions. What do I want to be today? I think that's a really powerful practice that that can really make or break your day. For me, prayer and reflection is a part of that. Um, uh, and when I think about the second half of the year, I think number one that we'll dive deeper, not shallow, but more deeply into um, into the ethical and moral implications of AI in
Hmm.
parallel to the speed at which we're in the physical side of AI. So I'm looking forward to that. Um, I'm looking forward to, I think, growth not only for the U.S. economy, for businesses, and by the way, I believe startups to me are the engine of job creation. So I think creating this innovation cycle and benefiting these job creators. I hope to see that sort of policy and coming from Washington. Um, and for me, I think it's reaching out to others in a way that isn't, shouting,
Yeah.
that isn't in this angst, but let's listen to each other. Let's communicate to each other. Let's let's start to build, I think, a fabric that is more based in calm and clear and values based. Just this world needs that, Matt. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm whether it's working in a company. I don't know if I'm going to be doing operational roles or more board roles. But I know that in every day, I'm trying to be that. And even though some days it's hard when you read what you read and see what you see, I am looking forward to maybe a little bit less tumult. But in the tumult, that we're living in, Matt, I think again, self-regulate,
Hmm.
as much as you can, calmness, stillness, and try and help others flourish.
I'm glad that you shared some of the grounding. We talked about grounding being important for leaders. You shared some of your own personal grounding practices, so I'm glad that you brought those up.
Well, whatever it is, I was out in Vale Valley. I'm about 2 hours from there, coaching in a basketball camp 2 weeks
Okay.
ago, and from 8 years old to 16. And it was a great
Yeah.
camp. Dr. John, he's scaled Mount Everest 4 times, and it's his camp, and he asked me to come out and coach. And one of the things I teach at the free throw line is, I've played basketball my whole life. I said, whatever your deal is, like some people like to spin the ball, some people like just two dribbles, some people don't do anything. I said, do it consistently because it's you.
Yep.
And so to me, I would apply that to your morning ritual, which is, if it's go for a walk and just breathe in the air of nature, do it. If
Yeah.
it's read the Bible or read the Quran or read the Talmud or read whatever your spiritual thing is, do that. If it's, I think intentionality is really important. Like, what do I intend to do more importantly, what do I intend to be today?
Hmm.
How am I going to
Hmm.
show up for others? And that's that. I think so. Whatever your free throw practice is in the morning, be consistent, and you'll see. There's a great book, Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've
Sure.
read it.
Yep.
Wow, phenomenal. About that's a habit you can do, and it costs you nothing. And I tell you, it'll change your life. If it's meditate, yoga, whatever it is, go lift at the Y. Whatever
Right. Right.
whatever it is,
Yeah.
just make it you. And I just hope we all move towards that.
Good stuff. Brian, awesome conversation. Thanks so much for spending time today. Really appreciate it and look forward to connecting again soon.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciated being here.